Pets enrich our lives and bring people and communities together. When I think about the social justice challenges our country faces and how everybody is impacted in different ways, I think that perhaps pets are the medicine that America needs now for individuals and communities to feel better and to do better. Because pets are social glue, the common bond between people with little else in common who otherwise would never have spoken to each other if not for their pets. Dogs and cats free people from these emotional barricades that have cut them off from other people. But to be fair, my neighbors know the names of the neighborhood dogs, but not the names of their neighbors themselves, right? At York County SPCA, we find loving permanent homes for stray and displaced animals. We investigate and prosecute animal cruelty offenders. We educate the general public about animal wellness and safety, and we control the pet population growth rates through an aggressive spay-neuter program. That's what we do, but this is why I do it. So I don't go to a job, I serve a mission. And so that's a drawing that somebody made of my wife and I with our 3 dogs and 3 cats, all rescues, of course. Our industry is a generous one. People want to help other people. So leaders in this field have listened, talked, shared, listened whenever my team and I reached out. It was amazing and was instrumental in us achieving our best practices transformation. So the reason why I wanted to speak at this conference and share our story is because I wanted to give back to the body of knowledge and hopefully contribute to the body of knowledge that we have greatly benefited from. She said you were coming. Yeah, it's all good. You're good. No, I'm glad you're here. The York County SPCA has been in our community since 1926, and in that time we've only had 3 locations. This is a picture of our current building that we've been in since 2007. And this is a photo of our previous building. We were in that building for at least 42 years. And this is Marilyn. So Marilyn is our kennel manager. She is a quiet, reserved person who loves the color pink, and she has worked at the York County SPCA for over 28 years. And she would love that her picture's here right now. Marilyn used to live full-time in that old shelter building. Right above the dog kennel was her apartment. So her modest apartment had a bedroom, a bathroom, a living room, a kitchen, and of course it had a building full of animals. And one day we took a field trip out to that old shelter location and brought Marilyn along because we wanted to collect an oral history from her. I knew that if we could get her inside that old building, that stories would come pouring out of her, and they did. And so there were some funny and sweet stories, but I also learned that from Marilyn that sheltering practices back then were sort of like being in the Wild West by today's standards, meaning that live outcomes were not where anyone wanted them to be. It was a typical overcrowded animal shelter, which is why they built that new shelter in 2007. The new shelter was huge, one of the largest in Pennsylvania at that time. Everybody knew that this shelter was going to solve their capacity issues because it could hold well over 300 cats, well over 100 dogs. They filled that shelter up in 8 months, and it remained at maximum capacity until 2020. When I arrived in 2019, staff morale was very low for several reasons, our high euthanasia rates being the major contributing factor. In 2019, my leadership team and I designed a strategic plan to address our high euthanasia rates and other organizational challenges. We called this plan the Best Practices Transformation, and we started working on it by October of 2019. By the end of 2019, our save rate climbed 11 percentage points from 53% in 2018 to 64% in 2019. In 2020, our save rate grew from 64% to 79%. In 21, our average save rate grew from 79% to 85%. And right now, as of 2 days ago, our save rate was still averaging 95.6%. So, thank you. Our save rate increased by 42 percentage points in about 3 years, thanks to our hard work, supportive partners, and the best practices transformation. In March of this year, Marilyn walked into my office, she sat down, and she said she wanted to tell me something. Marilyn never on purpose walks into my office. She certainly doesn't sit down to talk. And so I was like, what is it? What's wrong, Marilyn? And she said, she said, I just wanted to let you know that this place feels so much different. It's no longer a sad place to be. The vibe is so much healthier. And then she said something to me that I think best sums up our best practices. Marilyn said, now, when we have to euthanize an animal, It's a really tough thing to do. It feels a lot harder emotionally than it used to when we were euthanizing dozens of animals every single day. Marilyn is a veteran in this industry. She has seen a lot of crazy stuff. She lived in an animal shelter, for heaven's sakes. For her to tell me that now euthanizing an animal is difficult for her says something about the power of these policies in terms of leading to significantly more live outcomes for York County pets. I asked our shelter medical director, Dr. Natalie Weeks, to send me a short statement about our transformation, and so I wanted to read to you what she wrote to me. The improvement to our save rate is indescribable. Having been at the shelter throughout our entire transition, the progress we have made is incredible. The amount of animals that were previously being euthanized every day was gut-wrenching. When you're in the trenches, it seems impossible to get out. But now, being on the other side of it, I can tell you that it really is possible to save the majority of lives that come through the shelter. Another aspect of an increased save rate that not many people talk about is the improved mental health status on the staff. When thousands of animals are being euthanized every year around you, compassion fatigue is a very real and very dangerous thing. The morale at the SPCA has never been better. And I just want to give you one more visual example about the impact that these policies can have. And so right here, these books, can you all see them? We call these E-logs, euthanasia logs. And if you look in this, these are grabbed from 2016. All 4 of those are from 2016. And so if you look, these are just line after line, row after row of an animal that didn't make it, or animals that didn't make it out alive. Okay? So it's just all these pages are filled, right? And I've got 4 of them. So these are from 2016. 2018 looks just like that. So I'll just show you another one just so you know I'm not exaggerating. Like, it's literally line after line. And so on the slide there, you can see a picture. This is our current E-log. I took this picture like a week ago, right before they made me send the slides in. And right there, this grouping, that's 2020 E-logs. So that's when we were a full year into transformation. This right here, that's 2021. And these 2 pages right there, that's this year. That's 2022. And what you can't see in this picture right here, thank you. And what you can't see is there's an entry, like 3 blank spaces, and another entry. Those are just every row. So what I'm trying to say is that we went from 4 volumes of animals that didn't make it out alive to that, to 2 pages, okay? Our way of doing things is our way of doing things. Our challenges, our culture, our community, our resources, our business life cycle is different compared with everybody else's situation in this room. This presentation is not meant to be a blueprint for your organization. I'm guessing that many of the ideas that I'm going to speak about in this presentation are not going to be new ideas to most of you. What I'm hoping is that I give you a new way of thinking about tried and true policies and leadership techniques. Many of the concepts that I'm going to speak about are not my original ideas. These are ideas that were modified from thought leaders from around the country, including best friends. What my leadership team and I did was repackage all these ideas into a plan that makes sense for our organization and our community. The best practices is about being really good at doing the basics. And if you get good at just doing the basics, you get to hear comments like, the vibe is so much healthier from people like Marilyn. And I want to be clear about the language that I'm using. I use the word language, and sometimes I'll say boring stuff. What I mean by those words, I'm using those words intentionally because I'm trying to get my staff, my community, and my board into the right mental headspace for embracing these best practices. And what I mean by that is this information is out there in the body of knowledge, and it's seen as like, this is what you do to save the most number of animal lives. So I'm trying to get us in the right headspace for that. So that's why I use those words. What I don't mean is that this work is easy, because it's not easy. So one of the first steps that I took in beginning this transformation was to identify and hire my most trusted circle of advisors. For me, this group consisted of a shelter and clinic medical directors, an operations director, a development director, CFO, and a few other people. Many of these folks I brought with me where I promoted up from within the organization. Then we all set out on a research project that became a strategic plan that we ended up calling the Best Practices Transformation, which is essentially a collection of leading programs, protocols, and policies that we modified. From the start, we got really specific about what the basics were for us, and those basics ended up becoming our pillars of transformation. We got very intentional about what we were going to do and what we were not going to do with our limited amount of time, money, and emotional capital. For us, the best practices needed to focus on 5 major pillars of change. We needed to overhaul our IT infrastructure, remove barriers to adoption by embracing an adopters welcome culture, roll out the Community Cat Initiative, which would give us the best opportunity to save the most number of animal lives, and we needed to improve our internal communications and our external communications. It's just that easy. It's interesting to think how you structure your IT can have a fundamental impact on operational efficiencies. We blew up our IT infrastructure and started over from scratch. I know you guys know what I'm saying. Yeah, but before we blew everything up, we needed to have the best practices plan in place so that our IT would complement our strategic plan. Essentially, our IT overhaul gave us the tools that we needed to carry out the rest of the best practice transformation work, and it enabled us to be data-driven leaders. Getting a handle on our data empowered us to be strategic and transparent. I'm not going to go into a full review of our IT choices, but I did prepare a slide with the vendors that we selected. You are welcome to reach out to me, and I'll be happy to give you my opinion on working with these vendors. I have business cards in the front, so you can contact me. And I just was told that my slides weren't uploaded to the app, so if you email me, and I'll send you a copy of the slides. I don't have time to talk about removing barriers to adoption, so I'm going to quickly move through the material because I'm assuming that many of you probably already know about these concepts. If you're not aware of Adopters Welcome philosophies, I strongly recommend that you download and read the Humane Society's Adopters Welcome Manual that's located. The link is on the slide here. So the manual was published a few years ago, but it still remains a useful guide and a good starting place. So quickly, Adopters Welcome encourages organizations to take a hard look at your adoption process and then remove as many barriers to adoption as possible. So in our industry, we tend to see the worst of the worst in terms of how people treat each other and their pets. And if you're not careful, it can negatively color your outlook, which can over time lead to seeing and thinking the worst in people. Gradually, and almost unconsciously, we developed a negative bias towards adopters, and which led us to developing processes that required the public to prove to us that they were worthy enough to adopt one of our animals. And we asked people to jump through 1 million hoops before they could walk out the door with a pet. Because the adoption process was so tedious, potential adopters got frustrated and they moved on, and our reputation for poor customer service spread. We unnecessarily created many barriers to adoption, which ultimately reduced our adoption rates and led to a shelter that was often overflowing with animals. We now embrace a different philosophy of assuming that most people who want to adopt a pet have good intentions. Instead of harassing adopters with non-data-driven barriers to adoption, we are instead educating and listening, which has boosted our adoption rates. So I'll give you an example. Our adoption application used to be 13 pages long. Now it's 1 page long, and the questions we asked are geared towards helping our client service counselors get a better sense of a person's lifestyle, which helps us make better love connections between people and pets. In other words, we are relying on conversation over application. The hardest part of implementing Adopters Welcome was addressing internal culture change. Getting the staff to facilitate difficult, nuanced conversations consistently is tough, and it takes time. Training was key. Repeated training was key. Practice having difficult conversations was awkward, but helpful. Having the directors, including myself, go out into the lobby and help facilitate difficult conversations was impactful. You cannot give up on this process. Okay. Our community CAT initiative was the most difficult and controversial part of the best practices transformation. It continues to be the most difficult and controversial aspect of our work. For us, the community CAT initiative was broken into 3 rounds of rolling out and enforcing policies and programs. So the first round, we moved to a managed shelter admissions, and we also started a targeted trap, neuter, return program for colonies of 10 or more cats. And I just want to mention that in York County, we have 72 municipalities, and we contract with all 72 municipalities, which means that we are obligated to take all of the stray and displaced animals in our county, plus we're supporting the surrounding counties, and we were able to successfully go to a managed shelter admissions. During the second round, we implemented shelter, neuter, return in a working cat program. During the third round, we invested in growing our feline foster programs to improve our save rate, especially among kitten populations. And one more thing I'll add. I've been hearing at this conference, like people ask me, was I afraid to do this work? And I said, no, I'm surprised by the question. And one of the reasons why people seem to be afraid is because they're afraid of losing money. They're afraid that because these policies are controversial, that their donors are going to pull out. And I just wanted to also add, I wasn't planning on saying this, but when I started, our operating budget was like 2.7 million. Our operating budget is over 4.5 million. So I was able to grow the budget like over $1.5 million during this time, whatever it's worth. Best Friends and other organizations have a ton of resources that talk about what each one of those programs are that I mentioned. If you don't know how to get started with these programs, feel free to reach out to me and I'll be happy to point you in the right direction. There's like a Best Friends person floating everywhere around here. You can ask them too. Another good place to start is to become a Best Friends network partner if you're not one already. If you're a partner, Best Friends can provide some funding, but really more importantly, they will provide critical training and emotional support that certainly helped us stay the course. Okay. So one technique that I found helpful in terms of navigating change successfully had to do with understanding who my key stakeholders and key opinion leaders are and making sure that enough people from both groups had my back. Key stakeholders include your most trusted circle of advisors, the board, staff, higher level funders, certain municipal leaders. And key opinion leaders they're people whose voice can help shape a narrative for or against your policies. They are not key stakeholders. So examples of key opinion leaders are certain municipal leaders, community partners, elected officials, commissioners, mayor, council leaders, animal control officers, other law enforcement personnel, the media, certain volunteers, local rescue groups. Not all of these people are going to be your friend, but they are opinion leaders. You need to stay in regular contact with all your key stakeholders because change causes emotionally turbulent times, and you can lose these important influencers at any moment. So you have to keep track of where their mental game is at so that they don't lose faith in you, your leadership, or the strategic plan. I was constantly checking in with people, holding people accountable for deadlines, tweaking, making decisions, giving feedback, filling in at the weakest parts of the plan, and then I would move on to the next weakest part of the plan and strengthen that. Like, you have to maintain trust in you and confidence in the work. That's being a leader. So examples of how I did this was balancing lots of meetings without having a death by meeting workload. So for example, I hold weekly one-on-one meetings with all of my directors, plus we meet as directors once a week for an hour. My directors hold bi-weekly meetings. We host, at a minimum, one employee appreciation event per month. Plus, we give the employees food all the time. Like, I can tell when we haven't fed the employees in a while when morale starts to decline, right? Another important internal communication skill set is getting good at managing your board of directors. It's important that board members understand the difference between governance and operations. So to help with this, I brought in an independent trainer to help me set boundaries and educate the board members on what their role is. Don't worry, I'll give you copies. My leaders, just soak it in. My leadership team and I, not some external person or organization, wrote internal policies, procedures, and protocols for at least 2 years. In the beginning, it was just a hodgepodge of all these policies that were focused on every kind of topic under the sun. And then we wrote these policies in real time as the need came up. And then, like 2 years later, we combined all these scattered policies into an updated employee and volunteer handbooks, operational SOPs, and medical SOPs that are now living documents that we house in Bamboo HR. So they get updated in real time as the need comes up. And we actually use these documents as training tools. Why am I talking about this? Because this is the kind of boring stuff that gets your house in order and gets you good at doing the basics. Becoming more transparent with your key stakeholders is necessary. We talk about save rate at every director meeting, all staff meeting, and at all the board meetings. I educate our key stakeholders about what save rate is and what it means to be a no-kill shelter. We send shelter data weekly to staff and volunteers and monthly to the rest of the stakeholders through a printed and an e-newsletter. These key stakeholders have started to learn the vocabulary, understand our key metrics for success, and they are even able to define save rate. I'll bet you like 90% of my staff could give you the definition of save rate, and probably most of the board members. The first place that we started to improve external communication was to rethink what our channels of communication were going to be. So channels of communication is like your means of connecting with the outside world. And so examples of your channels of communication could include a website, social media, newsletter, like mailing postcards. We also maintain 4 email lists, so one for the media, which is how we send out press releases, one for volunteers, one for key opinion leaders, and one for municipal leadership. And then, of course, we can pull like emails and mailing addresses if we want to get in touch with our adopters, our donors, clinic customers. We struggled to engage our audience because we were not transparent in our communication with them, which resulted in a rise in apathy and a decrease in trust. To improve our communication among stakeholders, we had to improve our transparency. But with that said, I feel like people do not appreciate how difficult it is to become a transparent organization, especially if your data is not great. Being transparent puts the organization, and specifically the CEO, the executive director, in a very vulnerable position. It's risky and therefore scary to be transparent. And our job is to manage risk. So you have this dichotomy of exposing your organization to risk versus doing the right thing by letting your community know how to hold you accountable. It's for these reasons that I do not recommend being transparent all at once. You must balance your value of becoming a transparent organization with your responsibility as the executive director to manage organizational risk. My advice is to get control of your facts, know them inside and out, and do your best to control the narrative by lining up your key stakeholders and key opinion leaders before you start posting your numbers. When you put your metrics in other people's hands, you lose control. And it doesn't matter if your metrics are good or bad, because people simply won't know what to do with your statistics. They don't have the context or the experience for understanding. And so our job is to educate our audience on what all these numbers mean. The way that I approach transparency is exactly the way that we rolled out our best practices transformation. Start with your inner circle first, and then slowly expand your circle of trust out to the entire leadership team. And then the board, and then the staff, key stakeholders, key opinion leaders, and out and out and out. Along the way, you get better at communication. You deepen your relationship with your community. Trust builds, empathy grows. And you share a little more. You continue to educate on what your data means and your plans for improving your metrics for success. And out and out and out. Until one day you're a fully transparent organization and your data isn't as big of a shock to the system when you post your metrics on your website and shelter animals count because enough key stakeholders and opinion leaders finally understand what to make of it all. Okay. All right, the last half of this presentation, I wanted to review a few techniques that has helped me manage our way through transformation. I know this is not an innovative concept. I know that you all have been taught SMART goals a million times over, but SMART goals was a very valuable tool for me in terms of providing leadership, and so I'd like to talk about it. This is our process for developing SMART goals. We continue to tweak the process each year based on what works for us. I suggest you do the same. First, we review and update job descriptions every year prior to developing SMART goals. So I define the job description as a list of tasks that make up a person's job. If they successfully do all the things outlined in their job description, then they have met expectations. They have done their job. Goals are the things that people do above and beyond the job description. Goals are the things that move the organization forward in a strategic way. Goals are the things that ensure that we will continue to be a progressive, growing, improving organization. If my direct reports accomplish some or all of their goals, then they have exceeded expectations and should get appropriately rewarded. So prior to our SMART goals meeting, my directors will complete their SMART goals worksheet that I developed that functions in a way that makes sense to me. And then I complete a worksheet for all 7 of my direct reports. So then together we discuss and agree upon their SMART goals for the coming year. In my opinion, from the supervisor's perspective, the worksheet that is the most useful and practical is establishing milestones. I've included a few examples plus a fillable worksheet in your handouts, or you can email me and I'll send you one. So I'm not going to go through these examples because I can see we're running a little low on time. I like this process because it gives us a framework for negotiating priorities as a team. For example, Dr. Weeks will say something like, okay, Stephen, I'll give you standard operating procedures, but I really want to get an interactive kennel card going, and so we had the discussion and it made sense, so we threw it in our goals. Or in 22, Weeks and I both wanted to reduce our length of stay averages, but we had different ideas on how to approach the problem, and we couldn't do all of our ideas in a single year. And so during our goal setting meeting, she would say, here are my ideas, and I would say, here are my ideas. We would talk it out, and what we ended up landing on this year was doing shelter medical rounds, so getting that going and being consistent. Once we complete the SMART goals worksheet, they enter everything into Bamboo HR where we formally document and track progress. So every time they hit a milestone, they can go into Bamboo HR, slide the little tracker thing, and then I'll get an email saying that like, bam, so-and-so hit a milestone. And then I can go in there and like offer feedback, or more importantly, offer words of encouragement. So this way of administering SMART goals helped me be less of a micromanager. Because if they're doing their job per the job description and are working on their goals, which I can see because of the milestone thing, little tracker thing, then it's pretty straightforward that, yeah, they're doing their job, and then I can go off and focus on my stuff. This process helped remove the awkwardness and the bias of having to judge how good somebody was performing. We agreed together on the job description and the SMART goals. So it's pretty straightforward if they are not meeting, or exceeding expectations, because we both agreed on what that means and how that gets measured. This process gives us professional language to check one another. It makes it easier to say yes or no to opportunities that come up throughout the year. Like I get hit with ideas every single day. And I get excited about things every single day. And so I'll be like, let's go do this thing right now. And then the director will say, okay, Stephen, you're excited about that. So we'll go and do that project, but which one of these goals do you want me to stop working on so that I can do that thing over there? And then what that does is help me start thinking critically about our priorities, right? And I give them permission to be that direct with me, and they are that direct with me. Sometimes too direct. Okay, influence. Are you ready for this one? Getting better at influence allows you to get your key stakeholders and opinion leaders to listen, understand, empathize, and believe in you and your vision for the organization. Your ability to influence keeps your team and stakeholders motivated and maintains hope and trust in your leadership. Two different techniques of influence that work well for me are being a likable person and an effective storyteller. There are lots of techniques for influence. Those are just the two things that work well for me, so I lean into them. To be a likable person, you have to consciously behave in such a way that cranks up people's trust, admiration, and respect in you, thus increasing your likability and ability to influence. Techniques that I use to be a likable person: make a personal connection. Don't create conflict or confrontation. Instead, seek common ground over compromise. So common is more like a what do we both want dynamic. Compromise is more of a give-get relationship. Avoid leveraging your authority. Just because you have authority doesn't mean that people will listen. In fact, it could mean that your authority will put people off. Your authority could breed resistance, resentment, or even rebellion. Be a positive person. People want to be around positive people. There's enough negativity in the world. Like the weather sucks, the roads suck, the pandemic sucks, Biden sucks, Trump sucks, inflation sucks, global warming sucks. Like, I get it. Don't be that leader. Focus on putting joy and success right in front of people's face. Remember that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Demonstrate that you care about the people you work with and the mission you serve. Buy donuts. Get them a card on their birthday. Ask about their kids, even if you don't like kids. Consistently articulate why you believe in your mission. We all know the phrase, don't take it personally, but I don't buy into the BS that this work isn't personal. It's important, so it's personal. And every so often, I remind myself to communicate to the staff, the key opinion leaders, and donors why I'm passionate about this work. With all this said, yes, likability is important. However, do not blur likability with capability. Like, you don't want Fred Rogers to be your surgeon. You want to be liked, but you have to be capable. So work hard, be good at your job, people will respect you and listen to what you have to say. Demonstrating that you're right or the smartest person in the room is not important. Getting someone to admit that he or she is wrong is a losing battle because it invites an ego war. I feel like we spend too much time talking to a person's rational brain that we neglect their emotional brain. Like, facts don't work in terms of influencing other people. If facts worked, like, we would all be exercising regularly. What I'm trying to say is that you don't have to convince people that they're wrong to influence them. Bad decisions are rarely made because people don't have all the facts. Bad decisions are made because people ignore the facts, don't understand the facts, or don't give the facts enough importance. People don't want more information. Like, we are up to our eyeballs in information. What we need help with is finding our wisdom. People want faith. They want faith in you. They want faith in your goals. They want faith in your success. It's faith that moves mountains, not facts, and we are nonprofit leaders, which means that we are in the mountain moving business. But faith needs a story to sustain it, a meaningful story that inspires belief in you and renews hope that your ideas do indeed offer what you promise. Genuine influence goes deeper than getting people to do what you want them to do. It means that people pick up where you left off because they believe. They believe in you and in the world that we are trying to create together. Storytelling helps people figure out what all these facts mean and why they should give a care about your facts. Meaningful frustration is easier to bear than meaningless frustration. So a traveler comes upon a construction site where there are 3 construction workers. And so the traveler goes over to the first construction worker and asks, "What are you doing?" And the construction worker says, "I'm laying brick." And so then the traveler goes over to the second construction worker and asks, "What are you doing?" And the construction worker says, "I'm building a wall." And so then the traveler goes over to the third construction worker who's humming a tune and asks, "What are you doing?" And the construction worker stops, stands up, and proudly says, "I'm building a cathedral." If you want to inspire others in a big way, you have to give them a vision of what will become their cathedral. To live in this world with purpose and meaning, we have to give our staff some story of vision that gives their struggle meaning. So I can see I'm running short on time. I'm going to skip the storytelling examples. I don't want to turn this into a storytelling workshop. I'll do this one, organizational storytelling. These are all our photos, by the way. None of these are stock photos. The same concepts that I'm talking about for leveraging likability and storytelling to influence others are the same techniques that I coach my communications team to use for organizational storytelling. So I'll give you an example. When we give story first and then add facts, when you give story first and add facts, you stand a better chance of influencing others. And so a mantra that I use with my communications team is no story without data, no data without story. Okay, again, not wanting to turn this into a storytelling workshop. Let's talk about public relations. The amount of energy that it takes to, you heard me say this before, the amount of energy it takes to create something versus the amount of energy that it takes to complain about something, the internet has totally disrupted this process. You can pour a ton of time and effort into improving a process or developing a new program, and somebody with a keyboard can make a legitimate push to undo months of work that was intended to create actual real-world benefit. Nearly all of the change that we encountered resistance. I get resistance from staff, resistance from donors, resistance from board members. I get resistance from other nonprofit animal welfare groups. I get resistance online, and the social media trolls are never ending. I get hate mail, I get hate email, I get hate voicemail. Like, you have to be brave in order to do this work, and you have to be prepared to get good at public relations. So running short on time. We'll do this example. I call this dumpster gate example. Like back in March or April, we posted what we thought was going to be a pretty safe post on Facebook. Our pet food pantry supplies were low, so we put out a request online asking for more donated cat food. Pretty safe. Unfortunately, every time a kind person would leave a comment saying that food was on the way, a handful of our detractors would publicly reply to the nice comment saying that this is where your donated food is going, straight into their dumpster. And then the detractor would post a photo of pet food in a dumpster, implying that we were throwing away donated pet food. To deal with a situation like this, we created a code of conduct policy. We had already had one in place for what's appropriate social media etiquette, and we posted the policy on Facebook and on our website. The policy gives us something to reference for explaining our rules of how to appropriately engage on social media and why we remove certain posts. I included a copy in your handouts. So we have different rules of PR engagement for different scenarios. In this situation, the fake posts were made on our own channel of communication, so we decided to write a formal response. Here's what we wrote. Thank you for supporting our pet food pantry and food distribution programs. Please know that the comment claiming that we discard donated pet food is false. The photo that was included with the comment is not our property, and that is not our dumpster. We have very strict policies and procedures in place to ensure that all donations are used as intended for our community service programs. To be clear, we use and accept all donated food unless it is given to us in an unmarked trash bag. Contrary to popular belief, we even accept open bags of food, provided it is in its original packaging. We are deeply grateful for our community's continued support of our life-saving work. The day after Dumpstergate, we issued several stories focused on themes of teamwork and how we collaborate with our community. Oh, sorry. I got caught up in what I was saying. That was Ratopia. We got lots of rats. Okay, so we highlighted our strong partnerships with our community and how, because of the community support, we're able to save more animal lives. The PR strategy that we used in this situation was to rise above the fray and to move focus away from the fake posts and focus and have people think about the positive successes that are made because the community supports us. So this could have been a big public mess, but instead it blew over in a few weeks, and it helped galvanize our audience to support us. So running out of time. All right, PR techniques. Let's do this one. We do not let the public bully us anymore. A big reason why our save rate was so low is because for years our organization rolled over anytime the public acted out against us if we tried something new that they did not like. We let a small group of vocal detractors and our fear of bad press dictate our enforcement of life-saving policies because we didn't want to deal with the BS that is public relations. But in the end, the animals and the staff suffered. It can take years before your community accepts your best practices transformation work because culture change takes time. But I promise we are on the side of right. All right. The Appalachian Trail is a 2,200-mile footpath that for northbound hikers starts in Georgia and ends in Maine. You hike through 14 states. There's about 450,000 feet of elevation change. On average, it can take about 6 months to complete a through hike, and I completed my through hike in 2010. My trail name was Groom, that's Groom, because I married my wife at the end of the trail in Maine. Rolling out the best practices transformation has been like through hiking the Appalachian Trail all over again. You'll come across a million reasons why you should quit. It's hard, it's painful, it's not always fun. Sometimes the people stink. You always seem to be climbing up a mountain. You'll work your ass off to get to the top of the mountain, only to be surrounded by wet clouds and no view, and you'll start to wonder, is the pain really worth it? But then you look around and realize that you're not alone on top of that foggy mountain, that you're surrounded by people who give a care and want to be there next to you, their leader. Every single day, we fight hard to give animals the best chance at achieving life outcomes. And that work fills my life with tremendous meaning and gratitude. So there are days that are emotional and very stressful. But then the clouds will part. And you get to see something like this. And this. This. And that. So every day I leave my office, I walk around the building, and I'll see an animal who is alive because we did the boring stuff really well. Then I'll see an animal find a loving permanent home and remember that what we do matters. It certainly matters to those two. This whole week is about creating change together. Please remember that you're not alone, that I'm right there with you, doing my transformation thing in little old York County, Pennsylvania. You can call or email me if you need to test an idea, or if you simply need a friend. I encourage you all to stay focused. Know that you are 100% on the side of right, that your policies are saving thousands more animal lives, and eventually, time will show that you were a strong leader who did the right thing, even when that work was hard to do. And with that, I wish you all the best and a happy rest of your conference.